Hi everyone, we are from Group 7. In this video, we are going to discuss about the emergence of Middle English.
Hello, my name is Fiaina Nilasari and my last student number is 021. I'm going to explain about the emergence of Middle English and the context of change. The emergence of Middle English. Linguists often divide up the Middle English period into early Middle English around 1100 until 1300 and late Middle English around 1300 until 1500. The second half of the Middle English period, substantially more words were borrowed from French. The enriched vocabulary of late Middle English distinguished it from the early Middle English. The context of change. The vocabulary is more readily recognizable that of Old English, and the grammatical structure seems closer to present-day English than Old English. There was no national standard form of English in early Middle English period, and scribes wrote in the dialect of wherever in the country they happened to come from. Variation and difference were characteristic features of Middle English at its early stage, and while variation is a feature of English and at each of its stages of development, the difference is that in the Middle English period there was no standard form available for scribes to us. English, while influenced by French, was also affected by the Scandinavian languages spoken by the Vikings in Flanders, and combination of factors was responsible for development of Old English into Middle English. In the Middle English era is a period during which a number of languages were used in the country, such as French was the language of the ruling class, Latin was the language of the church, English was the everyday language spoken by the majority of the country population.
Spelling and sound in Middle English. Scholars have observed that certain spellings are common to particular regions. As a result, these different spellings were attempts on the part of Middle English scribes to represent the way that such words would be pronounced. Different spellings give us some insight into how the language was spoken in particular areas of the country.
My name is Rini Kusumardani. My student number is 034. I will start to explain about major difference between Middle English and present-day English pronunciation. In PDE words, we find silent letters. For example, we don't pronounce uk or the W sound in knowledge. And then, in Middle English equivalents, these letters would usually pronounce. For example, knowledge. These letters would have been pronounced except honor and whose the initial letters are silent, because those words borrowed into Middle English from French. The next point is how French scribal practice influenced English spelling in Middle English. Digraph th replaced voice th or th to represent voiceless th or th. For example, in Old English, dringen means to press becomes dringen in Middle English. The next is q replace qua to represent qua. For example, in Old English, queen becomes queen in Middle English. The digraph ch replaces Old English uk to represent the phoneme ch. For example, in Old English, child becomes child in Middle English. Then, the phoneme sh is now represented by the digraph sh as opposed to the Old English sk. For example, in Old English, Sharon becomes Sharon in Middle English.
My name is Putrika De Fortuna. My student number is 036. The changes as a result of the influence of French convention can indicate that the pronunciation of the words is different. For example, the letter H was acting as a diacritic or an indicator of different pronunciation. In the case of ch and s, The letter H indicated that the digraphs represented respectively an affricate. The example of affricate is as in the initial consonant sound of church, and also it can indicate a fricative sound. Fricative sound is a kind of sound produced when air is expelled through a narrow space between the articulators. It happens when you try to sing z or s. That sound is a fricative. Next is Middle English misinterpreted the significance of letter H. In present-day English, where and when begin with initial w. In Old English, it began with hua, like where and when. But in Middle English period, these words were being spelled with initial w, such as where and when, because the Middle English scribes assumed that the letter H was working as a diacritic to indicate fricative pronunciation of the letter W. This is according to Scrag. Nonetheless, the grabs W and H were reserved in a misperceived attempt at regularization. That's why, in some dialects of English, we can still find people who pronounce where with initial H sound, for example in Scots dialect. The consonants of Middle English are pronounced as they are in present-day English, but there is some exception. For example, the letter C retains the pronunciation ugh, but no longer has the pronunciation ch. And the letter C also has the pronunciation s in French loanwords such as protestation, and so on.
Hello everyone, my name is Nadia Manina, my last student number is 035, and I'm going to explain about B3.3, changes in the system of inflections. From the Old English period until Middle English period, the system of inflections became more scarce. Inflections did not disappear completely. By the end of the Middle English period, the inflection system became less complex than it had been in Old English. The causes of the loss of inflections in English are 1. Changes in the sound system of English. Changes in the sound system of Old English was responsible to reduce complexity of the inflectional system. Inflections became unstressed in speech and had the effect of leveling the pronunciation of the vowels in these inflections. This means that the vowel sounds in inflections lost their distinctness. 2. Scandinavian influence. Language contact between Danes and Anglo-Saxons is one reason why inflections began to disappear from English. The base of English word is similar to Scandinavian word. The difference was in the inflections that were appended to this word. Getting rid of the inflections make Danes and Anglo-Saxons can communicate effectively. Later on, when Danes had gained the throne of England, their power have raised the prestige of the variety of English that they spoke, potentially establishing it. A variety with reduced inflections as a variety for other speakers to aspire to.
The third reason is the process of language learning. It is possible that inflections were omitted in situations where an English speaker was conversing with someone whose first language was not English and who had only limited ability to speak in English. For example, some French speakers may well have learned simplified forms of English for the sole purpose of communication. However, the limited number of French speakers who may have done this make this an unlikely explanation for the widespread inflectional change in English. The breakdown of the system of inflection led ultimately to English becoming an analytic as opposed to a synthetic language. By the end of the Middle English period, inflection on nouns had almost entirely disappeared, and only one form of the determiner was used. We'll take a look at the examples on the screen. As we can see, there's an example of Old English sentence and two examples of Middle English. In A, in Middle English sentence, uses different forms of the determiner to mark the nominative and accusative case as in Old English. But during the Middle English period, the different forms of the determiner were gradually replaced with just one form, as we can see in the example in B. And because the Middle English nouns have no inflection to indicate case, where just one form of the determiner is used, we rely entirely on word order to determine the meaning of the sentence, thus making Middle English an analytic language.
And the last is Middle English vocabulary. During Middle English period, the lexicon of English increased substantially as a result of the borrowing of words from French that had the most influence, Latin, and Norse. The Viking invasions of Old English period had also led to significant borrowing. Many borrowed Scandinavian words became widely used during Middle English period. Borrowing is made possible by language contact. In this case, English come into contact with Latin at the work of early Christian missionaries, and contact with French came about both as a result of Edward the Confessor's French-speaking royal court and by the consequences caused by the Battle of Hastings in 1066. The decline of inflections in Middle English period made it easier to integrate words from other language to English, as their forms did not need to be changed to the same extent. The borrowed words often came from areas of life that the donor languages were especially associated to. For example, Latin contributed many religious words, such as pulpit, rosary, scripture, testament, and French borrowings hint at the prestigious position of French speakers at England at the time, such as prince, princess, virtuous, hostel, debt, cathedral, chivalry, magnificence, majesty, and Scandinavian borrowings such as egg, knife, freckle, root, and smile suggest fairly close contact between the Scandinavians and the Anglo-Saxons.